and I would like to welcome Marnie Sinclair here with us tonight. She'll be sharing her journey on how she became a climate change artist, and I'm going to let her give her own background since she's sharing her story. But I do want to let you know that we're really excited that Marnie is going to be one of our artists this summer in our gallery at the Visitor Center in Rockland. And for those who can't visit, or if for some reason the visitor center still isn't open, we will be taking advantage of technology and doing a virtual tour. So you will all have a chance to learn more about her art, not only with tonight's presentation, but at the exhibition this summer that will go into the fall. So welcome, Marnie. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spotlight you and you can share your screen.
So that seemed to work. It's a relief. Welcome, everybody. I'm delighted you're here. I want to thank Carney McRae and the Friends of Maine Coastal Islands National Wildlife Refuge for the opportunity to show my work and tell my story. What you'll be seeing tonight is a traveling exhibit that I have that's been 12 years in the making. And I'm still adding to it, actually, even today. It's called Balance and Imbalance in Nature. The balance is the magic in nature, and the imbalance is man's influence on the planet. Each piece has a scientifically researched story that informs the art. And some stories are hard to hear and read, and so I try to make my art as aesthetic as I can, and often whimsical to cushion the bad news. And I'm also, hopefully, will get the viewer to be inspired to take some action and feel empowered and try to change the direction that we're heading in. So excuse me, whoops. I grew up in Cuba and I spent 12 years there, very happily playing outside in nature. My family had a sugar business, and my particular family had been in Cuba since the 1860s. I loved being outdoors. I loved the beauty and the smells and the richness of colors and textures of the tropics. And I spent a lot of time studying the exotic creatures, and the birds and the plants and the trees. And I would spend a lot of time on my stomach looking at insects. And particularly, I was really intrigued by these ants and how they could carry these giant leaves up and down the tree trunks. And my sister and I had this wonderful game of fishing for tarantulas in these holes. We put little pieces of cheese on the string and then drop it down the hole and haul out this tarantula and get hysterical and scream and yell and then do it again. So after, anyway, we had a wonderful childhood there. But after about 12 years, the Cuban Revolution was raging and Fidel Castro took over and confiscated everything that we had and forced all the foreigners out. We returned to the Boston area and have never gone back since. As a family, we were very sad and homesick for our home. I was sent to a conventional school where I took my first art classes. I felt some solace when I would venture out into nature and draw. The art classes were good in terms of the fundamental instruction, but they never sort of inspired you to push the envelope. So this is a piece. These are contemporary pieces, these two insects that you're going to see, but they were inspired by my fascination with insects as a child. So this is the one on the left is the real one, and the one on the right is mine, and the one that was inspired. The two insect pieces are, this one on the left has this wild sort of little voodoo doll Fanny, and then he had these legs and he dances and does his little tush to attract his girlfriend, which usually doesn't pay any attention to him at all, and also to ward off predators. So and I had found this wonderful video of him going up and down the trunk dancing. It was a riot. So I thought that would be a fun thing to do. And then the next one is a cow. I call it a cow beetle. I don't actually know what it is, but I was very intrigued by all these insects and the lineup of insects that I found, and their wild patterns and body types, and the insects. So it was just fun to create. They always look like something else to me. So I made this cow, for instance, standing up, which was much more interesting to me than down on its legs. So this is, and then what I'm interested in is the metamorphosis to me, that's the most magical thing in nature, how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. And I remember as a kid, there was no similarity between a caterpillar and a butterfly. And I used to study them all the time to try to figure out how one could turn into the other. And then just in the last year or two, I found out how it actually works. And I'm probably the last person on the planet to know this, but it's amazing, actually. And what happens is that the caterpillar gets nice and fat and attaches to an under branch. Then it starts building this chrysalis. And as it's building the chrysalis, it is ingesting itself. And so when the chrysalis is complete, it's all just caterpillar gush in there. And so everything is turned into protein, except for these molecular imaginal discs that carry the DNA of the butterfly, and they're all attached to the inside of the chrysalis, and they use the protein to grow and then merge, and then out comes the butterfly, which I just thought was amazing. So then in the early 70s, I ended up getting married and living in Western Massachusetts. I started a family. I had 3 kids, and I lived and created a little farm. And we raised all kinds of animals and plants. And this little sheep collage that I made is those are our sheep, and a neighbor's sheep too, actually. But I made that for the kids. They always got a kick out of that kind of stuff. And we spent a lot of time exploring nature, and I wanted them to appreciate the diversity of all life in nature. And as a mother, I became quite concerned about the health of the planet just after my kids were born, and what we were leaving our children. Particularly as I was noticing the water and the air getting more and more polluted, and just also man's general impact on the Earth's balance. So in the early 80s, I took a trip to see my parents down in Florida, and I flew into Fort Lauderdale, and not Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers. And I remember flying in, and as far as you could see, as the plane circled the airport, it was just completely denuded of any vegetation at all. And all you could see was this grid of house lots. And it was just really depressing. And then when I got to my parents' house, I realized that I read that there were only 9 Florida panthers left in the world. And so it inspired my first environmental series, which is part of this traveling show now. And this, so these are 4x4 foot pastels. And the story is told in the eye of the animal. This is a panther. And the eye, inside the eye, you can see either what's destroying them or what they're lusting after to survive. And in this case, it's the wilderness in the eye. And then superimposed over the face is the whatever's doing them in. In this case, it's actually a street map of Fort Myers. This is another one. This is a humpback mother humpback whale caught in a drift net, and her baby's on the outside and she's in the inside. In her eye, she's desperate to get to the surface to breathe. And that was heartbreaking. And then this is pollution. There are three things that are destroying the planet, destroying the animals and creatures on the planet. One is pollution, the second is poaching, and the third is loss of habitat. So this is development here in the rainforest. It's the burning rainforest. This is a macaw. And in the eye of the macaw, you'll see the burning forest. And then superimposed over his face is actually a satellite image of the World Bank sponsored road that runs through the Amazon, and then all of this development off of the road. And this was a combination of poaching and deforestation. And then this is a panda, and loss of habitat for the panda. And in the eye is the wild habitat that he wants to get back to. And then cut bamboo is on his over his face. So what happened in those old days as an artist, and a lot of us, I think, were very careless about the materials that we were using. Nobody sort of knew what was bad and what wasn't bad. Well, people did, but I didn't anyway. And so I was making these huge pastels using raw pigment and putting it on with my fingers. And I found out later that the cadmiums and the cobalts were in their raw form were extremely toxic. So after these four pieces, I was really excited about it. And I felt like I was actually on a roll. And God knows there were a lot of a lot of creatures that were endangered. So I had a huge supply to work from. But I ended up getting cancer. And that just put the whole series on hold because I felt endangered myself. And I didn't know if it was from the pastels or on the way to Cuba and back. We were always sprayed with DDT in the plane to kill the insects or some other pollutant. So it was, who knows how it happened. But anyway, I stopped doing that series. And I actually just now, in the last few years, have decided that I'm going to get back to it and I'm going to wear gloves this time. So that's the good news. But what's really scary is that now in 2021, there are 200 species going extinct every single day. So we are really accelerating the destruction of the planet. So I got through my treatments as a cancer person. And then a few years later, I got divorced and I decided that I would move to Martha's Vineyard. And I was back to making conventional art. And I actually had a whimsical animal sculpture business for the gift industry. And so I was making those pieces down on the vineyard and selling them nationally. And then I also had a little gallery there. But as anybody who's in the business knows, it's very lonely when you're working by yourself. And I started to be longing for company and more environmental knowledge. Was really interested in the vineyard and all the goings on that were happening environmentally. And then I had this sort of aha moment. I was on one of the beaches in the dead of winter, and I was totally alone. And I remember standing there looking at this slate gray sky and the slate gray water and these pounding surf. And there wasn't a footprint on the beach, either way, in either direction. And I looked down and I saw this little tiny hermit crab standing right next to my foot. And I picked him up and I thought, you know what? There's no difference between you and me. And Mother Nature doesn't care. She's totally indifferent to all of us, you know? So it was just a very humbling experience. And so I decided the difference between the two of us is that I have a voice and it was time for me to use it. And so this piece on the right is of a hermit crab, which I did a lot later because I had a fascination with how they hang on to the inside of the shells. And the creatures are full of adaptations that are fascinating. And so they have this long appendage that wraps around the interior of the shells. So I had the great good fortune to get hired to work with this environmental group. And I had these past skills, which I oftentimes didn't know why I was doing what I was doing, but they all sort of came together and proved to be important for my job. I had done a lot of photography and writing and actually working on films. And so I ended up being able to use all those skills. And I worked for this company for 7 years, researching and writing about environmental issues on a weekly basis. And plus I made 40 videos of the vineyard water issues, of which there were many actually. And then 12 years ago, during this time when I was working at this environmental group, I joined a group of Boston artists and we formed the Time Project. We made experimental work and used materials we never used before. In my case, I used theater gels, electric wire, and driftwood. And we were supposed to make one piece a week for 52 weeks, followed by a monthly critique and fellowship. And my theme was environmental degradation and climate change. And I used my weekly research stories to inform the art. Our group was very supportive of all kinds of creative presentations, and we all gave each other permission to cut loose. Conveniently, I'm a process artist that loves experimentation. So this project was right up my alley. It was exciting to be constantly in the creative flow, which we were for 52 weeks. It was really quite extraordinary. And also I experienced for the first time the arrival of the muse during the designing of each piece in my head. I felt the presence of this little directive voice working on actual pieces, but now I was making design decisions inside my head, and there was this little voice in there saying, don't do that, that's going to be lousy, kind of thing. So it was really intriguing how it worked. And this is the first piece that I made, and it's all about climate change. And it illustrates how climate change works. The yellow gels simulate the greenhouse effect holding the sun's heat. The driftwood represents the land and the sea, and the lighter blue-green gels, the heated surface water. Lighter blue gels show the water evaporating into this vapor that's sent up into the atmosphere and returns as rain or snow in the darker blue gels in the back there. And the environmental series that I was working on was very satisfying, but I was kind of missing the aesthetic close-up of studies of nature that I used to do and really enjoyed doing. And so I also like to work with the whimsical sculptures as well. So these are my three venues of producing art. The lung tree is the political piece, and it shows trees being cut and bent over, and the trees are the lungs of the planet. And so I made the leaves in the shape of human lungs, and the trees absorb CO2 and release oxygen. And the deforestation and the burning of the rainforest shows our complete disconnect with the vital role of trees, which produce the oxygen that we breathe. It's harming all creatures, including ourselves. The orchid satisfies the need for the aesthetic and the sensual in nature. It also inspires and feeds my curiosity for finding incredible patterns, textures, and color. And the whimsy speaks to my need for lightness and playfulness, as seen with these wrestling baby elephants. It's fun and safe. And these elephants are made of bronze using the lost wax process. So as an artist, I tended to make up my own rules for working on an idea. And I find I'm actually kind of rigid about sticking with those chosen materials. So it's particularly comforting when you actually feel freewheeling enough to break your own rules and add something new. And so I finally sort of branched out of using the three materials that I used before, and I started adding stuff. And so this is methane. It's the melting of the poles. And I was late getting this piece into the environmental series, but I did feel free to add these materials. So the copper tubes and the sheets were necessary to create the feeling I was after to complement the story. This large circle in the middle represents the methane molecule, which is full of 30 smaller circles representing CO2. So methane is 30 times more powerful and lethal than CO2, although it has a shorter lifespan of only about 10 years in the atmosphere compared to about 100 years for a CO2 molecule. The painted metal at the bottom represents the melting permafrost on the land and on the ocean floor. And the top circular piece is the heated atmosphere above the earth, holding in the methane rather than releasing it into space. And then the red wires represent the heat and fire. So this is Petro and Oli and baby and they're the petroleum family. And a recent piece, this is a very recent piece to the show. This piece is made of plastic that can no longer be recycled here in Maine. It was inspired by a trip my daughter and I made to Cambodia. It was sad and shocking to see the mountains of plastic everywhere, with young women heavily burdened with children living amongst the trash. I decided on my return to use the plastic that I've been collecting to create this sculpture. And her shawl is made of images of trash taken from dumps that I found online and printed on silk. And I wanted her to look burdened, and I think she does. In fact, when she was finally finished and I put the shawl on her and looked at her, she actually made me cry. It's a testament to how some pieces can hang on to their spirits. So this is Earth Nest. I'm not a scientist. I am not a scientist, although in my next life I want to be. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and what we are leaving our children and future generations is not fair. We can no longer keep our heads in the sand and ignore what's happening to our only home. This Earth Nest features my infant granddaughter in a seagull feather nest. When I first saw this picture, I was blown away by her innocence and vulnerability and wonderment, which is not unique to human babies. All babies are vulnerable. We must respect and protect all species. This is Stella the octopus. She came about because I was fascinated with all the sea creatures and what was happening to them. The octopus, you'll never eat octopus again, by the way, when you know what an octopus is all about. They have blue blood, they have 3 hearts, 8 brains, 1 in each leg. And they have this extraordinary ability to instantly camouflage and all kinds of other adaptations that make them amazing. So I just really have a newfound appreciation. And this octopus is made from recycled plastic that I got from the neighborhood as well. She's made of plastic. She's sitting on a can filling plastic. And she has all these she's collecting plastic, and her anchor is plastic juice bottles. This is why, and this is one of the last pieces I made for the show. We are one species in a sea of life that inhabits our planet. In spite of our 7+ billion numbers, we are still only one thread in a giant web of life on Earth. The story is told from the toad's point of view. And the questions he's asking is, why should fires be set to destroy my habitat? Why shouldn't all creatures have a fair chance of survival? Why is one species, you, more important than others? Why are wild creatures at the mercy of our insatiable appetite for more? And then the why is written in the web, which was inspired by E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. And I say, why indeed should we be allowed to throw Earth's natural balance off? This is about the monarch, which is an iconic species. There used to be billions of monarchs, and now there are only millions, very few millions. They leave the northern milkweed fields and fly south in the fall, huge clouds heading down the coast towards Mexico, and they arrive at the Sierra Leone Mountains in the same place every year. And they winter over and then head back up the coast in the spring. They get as far as Texas or Florida. This is the original monarch that left in the fall from, in my case, Maine. And they get to as far as Texas or Florida, and then they mate, lay eggs, and die. And then 3 more generations hatch as they move up the coast. The 4th generation reaches the final destination, which is a very, very close proximity to the original plant, which means that they are genetically imprinted through 4 generations to get to navigate back to their original plant, which I think is just absolutely extraordinary. This art piece shows the destroyed milkweed pods that are made of butterflies, and the destruction of the habitat, which is shown in the black images, like housing going up and down the stems, the black stems. This is us. This is this is overpopulation. We are overrunning the planet with our numbers, and we're depleting all our natural resources at an alarming rate. Natural balance is off, and the Earth is becoming non-sustainable. Wire human heads are crowding out other species. Oh yeah, though these wire heads are crowding out other species. This is all along the base of the piece. And then I found that piece of driftwood, which looked to me like a lone giraffe with its head bowed, and representing all the other creatures. And actually the giraffes are now very endangered. And then the red and yellow shapes, top and bottom, are the heat and the fire. Then this is Seymour plastic, this 8.5-foot seal. And I needed to recycle more non-recyclable plastic. So I had to recruit my neighborhood again to give me all their plastic that they were using. And what was interesting about it is we were all collectively totally appalled at how much we were accumulating just by shopping every week. So it was good that we could use it. So he's made of plastic, he's full of plastic, and all the ropes and everything that's on him I found on the beach. And he's now actually sitting on a discarded, very big lobster trap. So now so I'll give you a few examples of the balance pieces. And I have to say that I was getting kind of depressed every now and then working on all this imbalance that was going on and man's influence. And so I actually took a little break, and I was down at a friend's house, and I just, we were talking, and I heard this very melodic sound coming from the other room. And I asked her about it, and she said, "Oh, that's my geranium playing the oboe." And I said, "What?" And then it turns out I went in, and the geranium was hooked up to a synthesizer, which was picking up the plant's energy, which was so interesting. And so that just got me on a whole different tangent. I decided to do a lot of research on how plants communicate with each other, and it's absolutely fascinating. This is the wild tobacco plant is, I think, probably the most complicated and interesting species I've ever read about in terms of the plant world. It takes fire for the seeds to germinate, and it can wait up to 100 years. The baby plant, when it starts to grow, is covered with all these predators, and it has no idea who they are and whether they're any good or not. And so it uses the nicotine, that's a natural substance in the plant, to kill all but the hornworm caterpillar, which is the caterpillar of the hawk moth, which is the nocturnal pollinator. If the baby caterpillars start to overrun the plant, it produces a sweet nectar that the babies love, but gives them a body odor that attracts the big-eyed bug that gobble them up. Still, if there's still too many adult caterpillars, the plant sends out a pheromone that ground lizards, so this is an interspecies communication that they have, that ground lizards pick up on and then come and eat the adult caterpillars. And if it's still, after all of that, has enough caterpillars on it so it's not sustainable, it changes from a nocturnal to a daytime plant with totally different flowers, and a hummingbird as a new pollinator. And it all happens in 8 days, if you can believe it. Here's the devil's flower mantis. This comes from East Africa. It's one of the largest praying mantis in the world. It's 5 inches long, and it's flamboyant with the colorful patterns and these wild front leg wing flaps, which it uses to scare its predators and attract its mates. And since it's a praying mantis, I put it on its knees, and it's titled, "I've Seen the Light." The kudu and the acacia is another fascinating story. The kudu, the acacias are from Africa, the trees, and they're very drought resistant, and often the only food source left for the kudu antelopes. We're desperate for food and can strip all the leaves off the trees and threaten their survival. The acacia retaliates by sending pheromones out to other acacia trees in the area to signal them to crank up the tannin, which is naturally in their trees. The excess tannin is toxic to the kudu, and they can cull the herd and return the natural balance, which make both species sustainable. And so the sculpture, the top red tree is communicating with the lower tree, and then the antelopes are at the base, and then the wire denuded branches are right above the kudus. Here's some more. This is the giant Douglas fir trees, and this is an interspecies symbiosis of the Northwest, depend on the fungus for survival. The tree absorbs CO2 and produces sugar. The root system of the fir tree mingles with the mycelium fibrous roots of the fungus, and the fungus processes the sugar into nutrients and then passes it around to all the trees, all the other giant Douglas firs, which I think is kind of considerate. And the Douglas firs are in the sculpture, they're the tall pieces on the far ends. And then the tree roots are coming down, and the little knobs that you see are the fungus with the yellow wires that connect the tree roots. And then the pitcher plant and the bat. This is a pitcher plant from Borneo, and the bat, they both have a symbiotic relationship. The pitcher plant is actually carnivorous, but it won't eat the bat because it needs its guano for nutrients. And in exchange, the bat has a cozy place to sleep. And then, what's really interesting about this plant is it's the only plant in the world that communicates using echolocation to attract the bats, which is similar to the sonar that the bats use. So on the sculpture, I have the bat flying right at you, right in the middle of the pitcher plant. And then the wire that you see in the front simulates the guano that hangs down. And then there's little circular, you can't see it, but they're connecting wire for the sonar that the plant and the bat have with each other. And then the Leafy Sea Dragon, which is related to he's related to the seahorse, but he can't use his tail. And so his only defense is camouflage, and he's really good at being camouflaged. And so he just goes and hides in the seaweed and just floats around in the currents. And he's only found in one place in the world, which is off of the Australian coast. And unfortunately, he's endangered because he's popular with the pet trade. So those are some balancing pieces, and then here are some of the imbalances. This is after the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels were introduced, and the CO2 increased from an average of 275 parts per million to 420 parts per million, which is today's high. And the 275 parts per million varied about 100 one way or another for about 100,000 years between the ice ages. But it's never been 420 parts per million. The oceans are saturated, and the chemistry of the oceans has become very acidic, and which weakens all the creatures with shells, as well as preventing them from growing to maturity. And the health of the coral reefs are also affected by and weakened. Their structural integrity is weakened. And so, this sculpture, the bottom of the water column, this is a water column. There are 3 krill, which is almost the bottom of the food chain, in varying degrees of disintegration. And the strips of blue and green screening that's coming down represents the CO2 that's entering the water. And this is migration, and that represents the drought. And the warming of the planet and the continental centers are drying out, causing increased evaporation and less rain, which is reducing moisture in the soil. The farmers are unable to grow crops, no food and no commerce, and end up migrating off the land in search of sustainable existence elsewhere. And so these are climate migrants, and all the little wire figures represent the climate migrants. And they're staggering and lost in a parched world. The bees, this is the iconic honeybee, which pollinates 80% of our crops, and is enormously important. It's dying off at an alarming rate. And they've finally figured out that these neonicotinoids, which is a new class of pesticides, could be the culprit. And that particular pesticide is banned in Europe, and the bees are having a significant comeback. But the pesticide industry here is too strong to be challenged in this country. So we are continuing with this die-off, which is absolutely crazy, I think. And then downstream, this is the actual piece. This is an older piece. The actual piece is an actual toilet. And those are little canisters for pills. And then the white part are the pills falling in the water. So 80% of our drugs are polluting our waters, come from our own urine, actually. And the aquatic marine animals in the rivers and streams are altered significantly by our human waste. And like the school of fish at the bottom, the blue fish have male and female characteristics, and you have frogs with extra legs, and we're just really messing up the aquatic creatures. The CO2 here on the left is a major heat trapping gas coming primarily from fossil fuels, and accounts for 60% of the emissions released into the atmosphere. This sculpture shows the impact of CO2 on the Earth, and the dark blue in the top of the circle is what it represents the CO2 in the atmosphere. The dark gray gels that are coiling up are the carbon emissions from the wire power plant. And this is, I think it's very important for all of us as human beings to maintain as much hope as we can to trudge on. And I can't emphasize enough how important your voice is. And Bill McKibben, who started 350.org, is a primary example of one man making a huge difference. And he is a Vermont professor, for those of you that don't know anything about him, and an environmental writer who, along with 7 graduate students, started 350.org, which was the maximum amount of CO2 in the atmosphere that can sustain life as we know it. And now it's, of course, at 420. And he took his 7 graduate students and gave each one a continent. And they created a huge grassroots movement focused on renewable energy and divesting from fossil fuels worldwide. They now have 188 countries that have active chapters that are working to clean up the air. And then here's Jane Goodall, who studied chimpanzees in Africa for 40 years and is now a leading advocate for forest creatures. And she just realized she couldn't stay in the jungle. She had to come out and become an environmental activist for the survival of all species in their habitats. She's now in her 80s and she works tirelessly in support of habitable environments. And I just had to put her with my little granddaughter, Winnie, here. And then that was sort of our generation. Now these are the younger, not even my kids' generation, the kids below them. And it's very inspiring what these kids are doing. This is Greta Tunberg, who is started her demonstrating at 16 years old. I think she's probably a little bit older now. She's from Sweden. She decided to boycott school on Fridays for climate change action. And she originally sat alone on the sidewalk in front of the Swedish parliament for months. Now the whole world knows about her actions, and 6 million people from 150 countries followed her example in March for Climate Change. It was the biggest demonstration ever. And this is social media and fossil fuel versus the fossil fuels. And I made this, and the derricks of the oil derricks ended up looking like the crown of the Statue of Liberty, which I was totally surprised by at the end when I was finished. And then the hands are made up of cell phones. Those are all the people across the planet that are opposed to the fossil fuel industry. And then Seymour, then the Boyan Slat is a few years ago, as an 18-year-old from the Netherlands, invented the Ocean Cleanup, a series of floating booms that were designed to clean up the huge plastic gyres that are floating in the oceans. He has had some false starts, but is now on target to clean up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in the next 5 years. He has also invented the Interceptor, which is designed to clean up the plastic in the 7 major rivers of the world before the trash mingles with the ocean. And these folks have been very successful in their ability to raise awareness and infuse energy and creative thinking with their passion. We must do all we can to reduce the use of fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy. Get energy audits, make your houses energy efficient, start using solar panels and heat pumps and driving electric cars or hybrids. Contact your elected officials and demand action on climate change. There's no time to waste. And lastly, don't vote for anybody who doesn't believe in science. This is our only home, and we must work to make it as sustainable as possible for the generations to come. So these are 2 other things that speak to this. This is the book that has all the pieces in the show, plus some new ones, which I'm going to use an insert and put in. And then I have a movie that I made. It's called Nature Spin Through Art. It's on YouTube. And you can just type in Nature Spin to Art and you'll find it. And then lastly, this is an Indian proverb. Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Marnie. So if you want to stop your share, then we'll look in the chat box and see if there's some questions for you. Okay. So we have one question here that goes way back to the beginning on the peacock spider. How big is the one that you made and how is it similar to the real one?
The little one is probably about an inch or maybe a little bit less, the real one. And mine is, I'd say about 4 inches around.
Okay, great. Are you planning a new series of artwork? And what aspect of climate change might that address?
Well, at the moment, I'm working on a big piece, which is, it's on the dinoflagellates, which are the single cell plant animal plankton that are basically at the bottom of the food chain. And they are incredibly important. And they produce oxygen, they photosynthesize, they are able to do the bioluminescence at night, and if there are too many of them, they create the red tides that we see. And I'm making a 5-foot water column, and I have these creatures floating around inside of it.
Wow.
So that's my most recent one, and I'm sure there'll be more to follow, but that's what I'm concentrating on at the moment.
That sounds really incredible. So we just have some thank you. I really enjoyed this. Great presentation. You're awesome. What an inspiration you are. Does anybody else have any other questions? If you weren't able to get them into the chat, you can also turn your microphone on and just shout out your question.
Hey, I just wanted, not a question, but Marnie, hi, it's Carolyn.
And hi, Carolyn.
Let everybody know, a few years ago, Marnie came down here to the Washington, D.C. area, and she put on this show, absent her newest pieces, at the Audubon Naturalist Society, which serves the D.C. area. And it was very well received. And we still miss that show, Marnie, as people walk through that wonderful space.
It was a great space, yeah.
It was perfect for all your pieces. And it just so resonated with me how wonderful that show was. I just want to let everybody know that it was so well received.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Anything else as far as questions? Because what I'm going to do is I'll stop the recording, and then if some people want to just say hi more informally, I'll open up the gallery. But I just want to make sure we've answered all the questions for tonight.
Yeah, I have a question. Hey, Marnes, Robert here.
Hey, hi, Robert.
So
where are you?
I mean, we go back a long, long way.
Yes, we do.
And I've always loved you and loved all the wonderful art you've done. I like those 3 categories you had, the whimsical and the, and what you've, I mean, we're both kindred spirits clearly around our passion and concern for this, this beautiful planet that we were given. That proverb captures it so beautifully, that what, our children and grandchildren and everyone else's deserve a much better planet than we're leaving for them. And it's been pretty much in our lifetimes that the escalation of all that greenhouse gas has occurred. And we both put a lot of time into actions and, working with McKibben on 350 stuff and petitions and marches and so on. And I guess what I'm wondering is, from your experience, I mean, I just love the art so much, and to hear you, describe, it's clearly a terrific way for you, your artistic talent, to express yourself and have enormous meaning for yourself, and for people to come and appreciate the art. What I'm wondering is, do you know, either from your own experience or in the, I guess, the climate crisis field, is art able to, kind of play a role in advancing the cause, if you know what I mean? Is there a way to use it to compel people to, get with the program, if you will?
I think my art is really helped by the story, and it's also the stories inspire the art, so the story comes first. But without the art, I think the art makes it really, as I mentioned, makes it safe and hopefully inspiring and aesthetic for the viewer, and it does cushion what could be potentially really bad news.
Oh.
So it pulls you in, allows you to sort of mull around inside of it, and then you read the story, and then the story will blow you away. But never mind, at least you're there, and it's a way of raising awareness. So I think art is a very important vehicle for getting inside the viewer's head.
Heart, maybe, yeah, soul.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Robert. There's another question here. Can you explain again about the bat and the plant, their relationship, and how they transmit sound?
The bat has the ability to sonar locate itself, and I don't know how that works, but he knows how it works, and he gets around the forest beautifully because of it. The plant has that same ability to send out that sonar, the sound, it's not sound, or is it? I don't really know, but it's very similar to the bat in how it communicates, and so that it can reach the bat and send the bat signals to come to the plant, and then the plant provides the bat with a safe place to live, and then the plant has takes the guano from the bat and uses that as nutrients. So it's they get along very well, evidently. I mean, who knew, but they usually, the pitcher plants usually eat anything that gets near them. So I think this is it's a kind pitcher plant, or kinder than some.
Isn't it amazing how the more you explore nature, the more miraculous it is?
And that's what makes me so sad, is that it's extraordinary how magical nature is, and it's just being really abused by us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
may I make an acknowledgement? Marnie and I were roommates in the early 70s, and her art, there's been a consistent theme from the early 70s around environmental issues. There's been a constant theme of that, and I am so impressed, Marnie. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And we have just another thank you for sharing your thorough knowledge of the balance of nature and how passionate you are in expressing your stories through your beautiful art pieces. So I think we're going to leave that comment to end this formal part of the program. And thank you so much, Marty, for sharing that this evening.